Leader of Reform UK, former leader and MEP for the Brexit Party, the man who yesterday tweeted the Democrats are making a serious error here with their vote to impeach Donald Trump, the first time ever in history that a president had been impeached twice. He said, Churchill told us to be magnanimous in victory. This impeachment process only leads to more division. I'm delighted to welcome Nigel Farage to the show. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Now, you have been a long-time friend and ally of the president. Lots of photos of you with your thumbs up next to him. You've spoken at his campaign rallies. He's been very generous about you as well. Why do you think, though, it is a mistake for the Democrats and indeed a number of Republicans as well to vote to impeach the president of the United States, given that he, as Nancy Pelosi says, has represented, they say, a clear and present danger to the country after those COVID riots which left 5 people dead last week? Why was it a mistake?
America's just been through many months of violence. Following the death of George Floyd, we saw violence, looting, burning, rioting, murder in dozens of American cities. And now we've seen violence coming from the other side with the storming of Capitol Hill. So whichever way you cut this, America is now at a very dangerous moment. And these tens of millions of people that voted for Donald Trump, they didn't do so because somehow he misled them or fed them with lies. They voted for Donald Trump because they saw him as their champion. They have lost total faith in mainstream media and its ability to be impartial. They've lost faith with social media and now believe they're moving into the realms of censorship. They have a view that the Washington class is just so far removed from their life and their concerns, but they've had one champion, and that champion has been Donald Trump. And if you impeach Donald Trump, if you martyr Donald Trump, if you ban and censor Donald Trump, you then leave these people without anybody to represent them. And that will be a lot more dangerous than Donald Trump standing for election and getting 74 million votes. And you may well find that what comes after Donald Trump is something very, very much worse. So I would make the point again that being magnanimous in victory is nearly always the right approach. And what I see from Pelosi downwards within the Democrats are a group of people filled with this sense of their own moral superiority, who are going to enrage and inflame the opinions of those tens of millions of passionate Donald Trump supporters. It is a huge error, in my opinion.
Joe Biden, the president-elect, though, was magnanimous in victory. He was talking about how he would represent everybody, people who didn't vote for him. He understood their concerns. He would tackle us. I agree with you, Nancy Pelosi, very much not so. My God, that is a very personal, bitter battle between her and Donald Trump. There's no doubt at all. But Donald Trump was also, the onus is on him, is to be magnanimous in defeat as well, to refuse to accept the defeat, to say he won't attend the inauguration, to call on his own supporters on the day when there's a vote going on in the House of Representatives and the Senate for them to in terms of his future, for them to and the president-elect, for him to then call on them to march, for him not to for many hours as people were ransacking Capitol Hill when 5 people died, including a police officer beaten to death. For him not to have called those people off at the first possible opportunity instead of being waiting hours and having his own aides having to beg him to do it. Does that not show to you this is a man who is not only unfit for public office now, but has always been unfit for public office? Do you not regret endorsing?
Well, I don't know about unfit for public office. I think as
a man
president,
who does not
his
accept
achievement,
a man who does not accept democratic votes is not fit for public office.
Well, accepting democratic votes, of course, we should all accept democratic votes, provided we're convinced they're free and fair. And of course, the Trump campaign and 39% of Americans do not believe the US presidential election was conducted on a free
but without
and fair
any evidence
basis.
to back up that belief. It's a meaningless belief. You can believe in fairies at the bottom of the garden. It doesn't mean they exist.
Look, I am utterly convinced, Julia. I'm utterly convinced that the by-election in Peterborough last year was won fraudulently. But I did my best, through a legal challenge to try and prove that through postal voting fraud had taken place. And guess what? You know, the Brexit Party took that case and we lost. So there comes a point when you have to accept what's happened, even if you don't like it. And Trump has used every legal and constitutional means to challenge that result. But he's failed to do it. It's now over. He has now accepted that Biden is going to be the next president. And I do think that calling a rally in Washington, D.C. on the 6th of January was a mistake. In that febrile atmosphere, I do think that was a mistake. But he didn't. Donald Trump didn't incite those people to storm the Capitol or anything like that. I would agree that Rudy Giuliani's language at that rally was unacceptable. But the point is, he was within his rights to challenge that result, just as, if you remember, a few years ago, the Democrats, Al Gore, challenged endlessly that result when it went for the Republicans.
Oh, well, indeed,
so
in 2016, the Democrats questioned the validity of that election. They brought this on themselves, and also I know you as a
Democrats have questioned the Democrats in the USA and the Remainers in the UK have spent years questioning the validity of Trump's victory and the Brexit result. So it's a bit rich. It's a bit rich of them to call him a bad loser. Now, look, as I say, he was within his rights to do all of those things. The rally, gathering nearly 500,000 people in the Capitol on that day in a febrile atmosphere, yes, I do believe that was a mistake. But look, he's accepted the result. He's condemned violence. And on the day itself, you say, why didn't he call them off earlier? He was putting out tweets saying, whatever you do, do it peacefully. Now, look, his style is not to everyone's taste. Okay. I know that. I understand that.
Do you regret endorsing him?
Do I regret endorsing somebody who has done more in the Middle East to bring peace than anybody else in living memory? No. Do I regret backing somebody who was pro-Brexit, was anti the globalist agenda that we see from the European Union and other organizations? No. Do I regret backing somebody who actually has the courage and vision to understand what the Chinese Communist Party want to do to this world? No. Do I regret backing somebody who, through deregulation and other measures, helped tens of millions of small and medium-sized businesses, men and women, all across America to get on with their lives? No. Do I regret backing an American president who actually likes our country and the English-speaking world? No. Is his style, are his comments at times a bit rich for the blood? Well, of course they are. He is the outsider. He is the disruptor. And I think it's actually very sad that his presidency is ending this way, because actually he achieved a lot in those 4 years.
Okay, let's move back to what's happening here in this country. We've got we're weeks into a lockdown. I think an awful lot of people are really struggling, much more than they were in the first lockdown, quite regardless of what is happening in terms of the death toll, which obviously lots of people are very, very distressed about. We know that the knock-on effect on the many, many millions upon millions of people who have lost their businesses, face losing their jobs, on furlough, on a fraction of their pay, children not at school, many not getting a proper education at all, people with depression, people we know it's turning to alcohol. We know an awful lot of people obviously unable to leave their homes. It's pouring with rain and dark and wet and miserable. Very different from the spring. We were all pulling together, I think, and we were, in this feeling that, look, this is for the next 3 months minimum. Do you think that the lockdown restrictions we've got right now, do you think they are justified? Do you think they're right? And do you think they should continue?
Well, the one big difference, of course, between now and last spring, and certainly I'm feeling it, is I know a lot more people who are suffering with COVID right now than I did back then. Indeed, 2 people I know have died this week, with COVID. So I don't underestimate how serious the virus is. No. I can also see, just going around, there's a lot more fear in people than there's been for a very, very long time. But I have to weigh against that the mailbag that I get every day, through my website. And I have to tell you, Julia, it is making very, very depressing reading. Elderly people living on their own, giving up hope, people whose businesses are collapsing. And they're all writing to me, asking me to help them. And I wish I could help them all. Cancer operations being cancelled. And, when you hear Chris Whitty and people like this saying that actually into next winter, we may face lockdowns, mask wearing, I just have this feeling that economically and socially, we are doing greater harm to the country than anybody in government actually realizes. And I'm pretty fearful for where this is going to take us. So what do we have to do? Well, we have to try and find some way of life continuing. And I'm not actually convinced that lockdowns work. Does social distancing make sense? Does actually wearing a mask in a shop make sense? Yes, it probably, much as I hate it, but it probably does. But I think if we're going to go on with this lockdown mentality, then genuinely the cure will prove to be worse than the disease. So we're in a very, very bad place.
Okay, and just finally, possibility, it looks very likely that the government's going to cancel or postpone those local elections. Again, we saw it last May. May the 6th, it's local elections in England, police and crime commissioners, Welsh Assembly elections, Scottish parliamentary elections, all taking place. Of course, America was able to hold an election, postal ballots, you don't like those, but an awful lot of people are voting by post, or we could have voting, say, 3 days to vote, so people weren't in a situation where they were queuing up very closely in the polling stations. But is there any justification for those elections to be cancelled?
No, this is outrageous. You cannot suspend the democratic process just because of COVID. Look, the local primary school where I vote, it's closed anyway, isn't it? The kids aren't at school anyway. So rather than saying to people, all vote on one day, you could spread it out over the course of 2 or 3 days. And I really do think that suspending elections would be a very, very big mistake, but I suspect that it is going to happen.